In this video, we're going to talk about spiders, so let's go ahead and dive into it. We're going to start with their biology, and then we're going to just dovetail into some fun facts about spiders. First off, spiders are arachnids, which means they have 8 legs. Now, within arachnid, there are several subsets, and spiders is one of them. So spiders are arachnids, so are scorpions. Ticks are a kind of arachnid, mites are a kind of arachnid, and then harvestmen, which is more commonly known as the daddy longleg. And so if somebody ever says, yeah, a daddy longleg is the world's most venomous spider, but it can't bite you because it doesn't have big enough fangs, first off, that's wrong because daddy longlegs are not spiders. Daddy longlegs are arachnids, but they are not spiders. And then the other thing that's wrong is that daddy longlegs, aka the harvestmen, can bite you, but they're not venomous. Now the difference is spiders have 2 body parts. With spiders, this front body part, and it's usually smaller, but it's the part of the body that connects to the legs, is called the cephalothorax. The rear body part is called the abdomen, and spiders have those 2 distinct body parts. Harvestmen, aka the daddy longleg, as well as ticks, they only have 1 single body part. And so that's the biological difference between spiders and other of their relatives, the other 8-legged relatives such as ticks, mites, scorpions, etc. And then for a different video, we'll talk about the difference between ticks, scorpions, and harvestmen, but that's outside the scope of this video. Another interesting fun fact about spiders is that contrary to popular or public opinion, they can fly. They've developed a very unique, interesting, evolutionary way to fly. What they do is with their spinneret, which is their spinnerets are in their abdomen, they will shoot silk straight up in the air, and the electromagnetic charge of that silk will cause them to fly, essentially. And so that's how spiders move from one place to another. A lot of spiders do that. If you've ever been to a canyon, you look down, if the sun's hitting it just right, you can see a lot of these silky things in the air. That's spiders flying through the canyon. They use it to cross rivers and to move vast different distances. If there's a spider that lays its eggs, obviously, this new egg sac that just hatched may have 200 or 300 spiders. They can't all live right there, and it would take them a long time to crawl far enough away from each other that they could then be successful as a species. And so what they do is they use their spinnerets, lifts them up, they go somewhere else. Spiders I classify spiders when I teach technicians to classify them into 2 different kinds. I don't know if this is biologically correct, so if you talk to some professor at a university, they may say, I've never heard that before. But basically, I classify them into homesteaders and hunters. Homesteaders are the spiders like this black widow that we have up here that builds a web, and then they just stay there, and they never move. They live their whole life right there by that web. So these kind of spiders, they typically don't come in contact with humans. And a lot of people will be like, well, I really like spiders because they get rid of a lot of other insects. And that's not really true. As we talked about in the wasp video, spiders, they don't use a lot, especially homestead spiders, they don't use very much energy. And so a spider that just builds a web and then just sits there, they are consuming almost 0 amount of energy just by sitting there. And so they could live on maybe 1 or 2 or maybe 3 mosquito-sized prey per week. They don't need that much. If they have a big bug like a fly or a larger bug come into their web, they may be good for like 2 or 3 weeks. So spiders, especially homestead spiders, they don't eat a lot of bugs. They do eat bugs, but not very many. But the good thing about those homestead spiders is people typically don't see them because they just stay in a spot. They come in. As soon as they find a place where they're like, this is the place, this is home, then they set up shop and that's where they stay, which is why a lot of spiders will come in through the window and they'll just build a web right there, right by the window, because they're like, yeah, this is good, I like this place. It's not as cold as it was outside, so why should I travel any further? It's kind of like the Denver phenomenon. So when Americans moved westward, they came across the plains, and then they hit Denver, and there's this looming massive mountain in front of them, the High Rockies, and they're like, yeah, we'll just set up shop here. And that's why the Front Range has developed in Colorado, because all those people hit the High Rockies and they're like, yeah, this is far enough. And that's what spiders do when they come inside the house. As soon as they find a place where they're like, this is good, which is why a lot of times you'll find black widow spiders that are just right next to the garage door where it closes. They come in just so they're just inside, right next to the garage door, and they're like, this is good. Another fun fact about this particular spider, black widow, you can see the very distinct shape of its web. Her web is very chaotic. It's not, there's no rhyme or reason. It's not like an orb weaver spider. An orb weaver has a very uniform web, and it's like the iconic classic spider web. The black widow spider is not that way. It's very chaotic, and it's also not one-dimensional. It's 3D, meaning that it may consume, about the size of a basketball, and it's just this really sporadic, and it's kind of a unique web in that you can see the light reflect off of part of it. The other thing about a black widow web, if that's not distinct enough, which just by looking at it, you'd be like, yeah, that's black widow, is that if you rip the silk, you can kind of hear it ripping. So if you take your pen or a stick or whatever and you kind of pull it through the web, if you can hear just a really faint cracking sound, then that's a black widow web for sure. And there's probably a black widow hanging out, so be careful. Black widows are obviously venomous. Their venom is more toxic than that of a rattlesnake, but their bite is far less lethal than a rattlesnake, because although their venom is more toxic, they inject so little into you compared to a rattlesnake that for most grown healthy adults, a black widow bite will not be life-threatening. If it's a small child, a feeble person, an elderly person, then it's obviously a different story. But if you're a healthy person, you get bit by a black widow, more than likely what it's going to do is it's just going to make you a little sick. Black widows have a neurotoxic venom, which means that it attacks your neurosystem, and it's likely to give you, in some ways, kind of flu-like symptoms. There's other spiders that have a cytotoxic venom, where if they bite you, it creates a sore, such as the hobo or the brown recluse spider, which we don't have a lot of in Colorado, but we do have a ton of black widows. I mean, they are super common in Colorado. They're in a lot of homes. The other thing about a lot of spiders, not all of them, but a lot of spiders, including the black widow, they are sexually dimorphic. What that means is that the male and the female look very differently. So if I had a black widow female, you'd be like, yeah, that's a black widow. The other thing, though, if I had brought in a male black widow, you'd be like, I don't know what that bug is. And it's a black widow. It's just the male version of it. The other thing about the black widow is it's got, as you can see here, we've got the iconic red hourglass shape. Not all black widows have the iconic hourglass shape, and it's not always red. And so if you see a black widow that looks like this, a bug, a spider that looks like this, it is the black widow, even if it doesn't have the red hourglass shape. I got in Facebook a little while ago. There was this conversation that I saw that I had to jump as like Western Slope classified ads, and somebody posted a picture of a black widow, and had front, like, top and bottom pictures of it. And she was like, can somebody please ID this? And everybody was like, yeah, it's not a black widow because it doesn't have the hourglass shape. And I'm like, I jumped on there, and there's already like, I don't know, 100 or so comments, and the vast majority of them were like, yeah, it's not a black widow, it doesn't have the hourglass shape. And I jumped on there and I was like, I have worked in the pest control industry for a very long time. I own my own company. That is a black widow. It doesn't have to have the hourglass shape. It's definitely a widow. Just because it doesn't have the shape doesn't mean it's not a widow. I think it's about 10% of individuals, and maybe slightly less than that, don't have the hourglass shape. So anyways, that's that. We've talked about the other kinds of arachnids. In this video, we're going to focus mostly on spiders. Let's go ahead and talk about the damage summary. The biggest thing with spiders is that they are, in humans, for some reason, arachnophobia is really, really prevalent. I've seen some estimates that say up to 50% of people have arachnophobia. I don't know if it's that high, but it's probably a third. So a huge majority of people don't like spiders. I don't know why. I don't know if it's back in the caveman days, if spiders bit us and we didn't like it, and so it just developed this innate biological ingrained sense of we don't like spiders. But people don't like spiders, and they certainly don't like them in their house. The reality is spiders aren't actually that dangerous. I mean, as we talked about in the wasp video, wasps account for like 500,000 ER visits annually. That's domestic in the US. Spiders is not nearly that high. In most spiders, they're harmless to people. In fact, the most venomous spider in the world, which is universally considered understood to be the Brazilian wandering spider, aka the banana spider. So that spider is considered to be the most venomous spider in the world, and it will kill a healthy adult human. I think it's less than 1% of the time. Maybe it's less than 5% of the time. It's not very. So my point is that most spiders, even the super venomous ones that bite you, if you're a healthy person, you're going to be fine. But the thing with the damage that spiders do is just the psychological effect that they have on people. If you have somebody that has arachnophobia, they don't want spiders in the house, period, for any reason. And you could sit there and talk to them and be like, well, technically they're kind of a cool animal, and they can't actually hurt you. Most of them are pretty harmless. If you're dealing with somebody that has arachnophobia, they're like, I don't care. I don't want it in my house. So our job is to set up a good barrier, keep those bugs outside where they belong. That said, I used to have a huge sense of arachnophobia. Now, if a spider gets on me, I'm super not cool with that at all. But I can look at a spider, or I could even be in the same room as a spider, and I'm not going to jump up on the bed and scream like I might have done when I was a small kid. But when I was a kid, I had this huge sense of arachnophobia. Learning about them has helped out a lot. But with that said, I still don't like spiders, and I do not want spiders in my house. I think spiders are cool as long as they stay outside, and I like that they exist in the world, but I don't want them in my house, and a lot of people, the overwhelming majority of people, are that way. So that's the damage that they do. Our job is to set up a good barrier where they can't come in through the foundation and block other entrances like the windows and things like that. So let's go ahead and talk about the treatment. With spiders, the biggest thing is just the crack and crevice treatment on the inside, and then getting rid of any other options where they can come into the house, and then also doing the barrier treatment around the house. So we do our perimeter treatment all the way around. That will make it so spiders that crawl are not going to get inside the house. Also, I said before that spiders fly with their spinnerets, and they use the silk to fly. They do that usually the first time when, like, after and they're small, they're young, and their egg sac has hatched, and they want to go long different distances. But they don't typically do that just to go from point A to point B, especially if they're a hunter spider. And so if it's like a wolf spider or something, they may, some species of spiders may travel long distances to begin with, but then that's it. So my point is that if you set up a perimeter treatment, they're not going to fly over that. Now what they could do is if you got bushes that are really high, they could climb up and over the bushes and then thereby bypass that perimeter treatment. And so from the inside, we want to do crack and crevice anywhere where pipes or wires come into the house, crawl spaces and things like that. Windows, any window that opens will have a weep hole, and we want to treat that area. The doors obviously have a crack, especially if the weather stripping starts to break down, which it will do over time. The weather stripping on garage doors will weaken over time, and that's something that we want to make sure that's treated. Also, if they have a two-car garage, even if they have perfect weather stripping, where the two slabs come together, there will be a little hole, a little crack, and the weather stripping won't completely block that. And a spider is like a superhighway for all kinds of bugs, spiders specifically. And so we want to make sure that area is treated. Typically, if you've got a quarterly account, then we do the perimeter outside spring, summer, and fall. And then in the winter, we do a really thorough interior treatment. We also can treat the walls inside the wall voids, and that'll help spiders, not the homesteaders, but the hunters that just move around and roam through the house. They will access whatever wire or inside the walls to move from point A to point B in the house. And so if we can get inside those wall voids, that will help a lot for those. Typically, the biggest problem the bigger problematic area that you have spiders will be level 1. Now, you can have spiders level 2, but typically spiders will hang out on the first level of a house. With that said, spiders are not like ants where they're not drawn to food source. So if you drop a little food on the ground, or your kid has a popsicle and he puts it on, it falls on the ground, ants are going to come to that, but spiders won't. Now, spiders may come to the insects that are in that area, but it's not likely that you're going to have more spiders in the kitchen than any other room. So they're just universally spread throughout the house. Another thing that will help to get rid of spiders is a really good, robust granule treatment on the lawn outside. The other thing is spiders, they hang out in the lawn a lot. When they do move into the house, and there's several species of spiders, when the temperature starts to drop, they'll start to move in. When they do come into house, although they're not attracted to food, what they're typically attracted to is shelter, concealment. And so if somebody has a garage and it's just got a ton of stuff in it, that's where you're more likely to find spiders. The same thing goes if they've got a really messy room or whatever. That's where you're typically going to see spiders. They also can be attracted in some sense to wet, moist areas. And so if you have a towel that is wet and it's on the ground for a while, and it's just like damp enough where it's nice and moist and concealed and dark, that's where you're likely to find a spider. So you want to treat all those areas. If you do a really good job with a granule treatment on the exterior, the foundation treatment, and if we do the interior treatment as needed, quarterly for example, we do it once a year, and on the initial treatment, we can gain a super high control of the insect. Now with that said, let's talk about expectations. Typically, if people have a quarterly treatment with spiders, we can gain close to 99% in a very short period of time. If somebody is super arachnophobic, they may want to consider a monthly treatment more for their peace of mind, but the treatment will work with a quarterly. So if their only issue is spiders, a quarterly will do pretty well. Now, if somebody has a monthly treatment, then just like all our monthlies, you want to do the perimeter treatment every time, but then you can alternate between doing one thing and the other thing and another thing. So for example, every time you do the foundation treatment, then another time, one time you can do the foundation treatment in the eaves, the next time you can do the foundation treatment in the yard, the next time you can do the foundation treatment in the inside, the next time you can do the foundation treatment in whatever. And if you do that kind of a treatment with a monthly service, it will work pretty well. But spiders, luckily for the people who have arachnophobia, spiders are one of these things that we can control pretty well with a monthly or even with a quarterly treatment. And that's all I've got to say on that. We actually have graham crackers too, period, smiley face. I have wood, period, I'll bring it, period. For meals, I was planning on getting some hot dogs, and then just doing cereal for breakfast, period.